Netball, particularly when we look at basketball and volleyball, we really look at probably the most important aspect, which I think a lot of strength and conditioning coaches have neglected to look at over the number of years, is basically the first and foremost aspect of the strength training, which is rehabilitation, which is a term that has come about by the use of exercises that were previously just used as rehabilitation exercises, but to actually put them in position first in the training program, so that the first few weeks of introducing a person to a weight training program comes after we would do some form of musculoskeletal assessment. So if you don't have access to a physiotherapist, or if you're working with younger age groups, that will be too costly to involve with a physiotherapy program, or some of the older age groups that you might be working with have physios attached to your teams. I think probably the first and foremost thing we need to look at is have each player assessed on an individual musculoskeletal basis. In that particular area, before we start thinking about loading as far as any of the loading requirements of strength training or the actual loading demands of conditioning or speed type training programs are concerned, we start to look at the individualisation of the program. I think from a personal training perspective, it really then adds that personal to the personal training. Mm-hmm. So if I was starting off as a personal trainer involved with working in any sport, let alone just the general public, yeah, I think the first session I'd try and key up a really good physio that I could develop a relationship with. Uh-huh. And that first session I would get that physio to do a full assessment, because then straight away we can really work from a grounds up approach. So that when we look at the number of injuries, and I think ankle injuries, particularly these three sports that we're actually profiling this evening, ankle injuries are probably one of the most prevalent injuries that we look at. And actually, if you equate all the sports in the world, 20% of all sporting injuries are ankle related. So a huge number of injuries when we actually consider the number of sports actually played. So really, when we look at a basic rehabilitation program for basketball, netball, volleyball, the first thing we'd look at is probably some balance and proprioceptive type exercises. And in the handouts you have there's actually a listing of some of the balance type exercises that I would use. When I was with the Parramatta Eels, we had a PhD study coming in from Cumberland College, and this particular physio wanted to look at the reduction in ankle injuries by following a proprioceptive program using balance boards. So we underwent some testing, and we performed 3 10-minute sessions a week in our off-season, and then continued that through the rest of the next year with 2 10-minute sessions to follow it up. We reduced our ankle injuries by 67% in the second year from the previous year. So when you're looking at that as far as professional sports are concerned, if we have a particular player who is basically looking at $15,000 to $20,000 a game being paid, if we can actually reduce a grade 3 to a grade 2, or a grade 2 to a grade 1, or a grade 1 to nothing, we've actually got that person on the field for a lot longer. And even if it's an amateur type sporting situation, it's basically the enjoyment of playing. You're playing for the enjoyment of it, so you're not playing to get paid or anything like that. So if you can actually minimise the time spent off the court, then we can start looking at performance. Because the secondary side of strength and conditioning programs for coaching and for athletes is performance improvement. But if you've got a person having an injury and can't actually get out there to perform, then we've wasted half the equation. So if we go right back to the beginning situation and have a look at the type of proprioceptive type programs we can put in place, particularly for a rehabilitation area, I think working from the ground up, ankles, there might be a small expense, but even then we can avoid the expense by actually just doing some free body type exercises. And really, as soon as we take the eyes out of any of our movement patterns, we actually increase the level of proprioception required. So if we do some just general balance exercises, and it doesn't matter what level of game you're actually playing, whether it's 10-year-old kids all the way through to adults, if we can actually get them initially just balancing from one leg to the second leg, so moving from the left leg to the right leg. Mark Sayers is a biomechanist out of Canberra. He does a lot of agility and movement drills. Basically, when he says stop, the people are moving left or right, and then he says stop, and then they have to freeze and hold that position for a period of time.